We are breaking down more wide receiver prospects for the Buffalo Bills in the 2024 NFL Draft today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. Very excited to talk wide receiver prospects in the 2024 NFL Draft and project them to the Buffalo Bills. And we've been doing a lot of these different conversations. We did a safety conversation yesterday. We've done defensive tackles. We've done some edge rushers. We've done another batch of wide receivers. And all of this is for a purpose. Obviously, we want to get ready for the 2024 NFL Draft, but we are building the Buffalo Bills 2024 draft board. And at the end of all these prospect breakdowns, I will have available to you a draft board that you can follow along with on draft night. And we have plenty of more to come. We've got offensive linemen to get to. We have even more wide receivers after this batch, defensive tackles, edge rushers, more safeties, running backs. We got so much to do. And today we're covering 6 wide receivers. Again, not all of them. And these aren't necessarily my top 6 receivers. This is just a batch of them. So coming up today, we are going to talk Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, Xavier Worthy from Texas, Keon Coleman from Florida State, Roman Wilson from Michigan, Ricky Pearsall from Florida, and Javon Baker from UCF. We've already done an episode on Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, and Troy Franklin. So if you're looking for analysis on those guys, we've already done it. So go back a couple of weeks ago. You'll find that episode. And I still plan to get to a bunch more receivers. Jermaine Burton, Devontae Walker, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, Malik Washington, Malachi Corley. There's a lot more to do. And it feels like after every single one of these episodes, I'm getting questions about, well, you didn't talk about this player. I know it's only for these 6 players today. So just keep that in mind. We're talking about the 6 players and 6 players only, and we will get to other ones, or perhaps we've already gotten to some of them already to this point. But I want to start this conversation out with Xavier Legette. And I have a lot to say about Xavier Legette. So let's say those things. All right, Xavier Legette, 6'1", 221 pounds, 31 7/8 inch arms, 9-inch hands, an RAS score of a 9.89. Also a little asterisk there. He didn't do the agility scores, so obviously those may have brought it down. So it's very good, but it's incomplete. Production, he had a great year in 2023. 71 catches, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns for a South Carolina offense that I thought had terrible offensive line play, and is pretty impressive what he was able to do. Now, the kind of the downside is he had virtually zero production. I mean, literally almost none from 2019 through 2022. So 4 seasons of nothing, then a huge year in 2023. 74% of his snaps come outside, 5.3 yards after catch per reception, average depth of target for his career of 12.5, 6.6% drop rate, and a 43% contested catch win rate. So why should the Buffalo Bills consider drafting Xavier Legette? A lot of reasons. He's a big physical receiver that is an alpha in every way. He's a big receiver that plays big. Explosive accelerator. He's a guy that gets off the blocks in a hurry and gets to that top speed very rapidly. I love him with the ball in his hands. He's very good when it comes to yards after catch. He's quick. He's physical. He's creative. He sees the field well. He consistently breaks pursuit angles. Guys are trying to catch up to him and they can't. He's a guy that can win the edge on outside handoffs if you want to hand the ball to him. Plenty of examples of him doing that in the SEC. And he's a guy that should be an asset in the screen game and the return game because of how good he is with the ball in his hands, and he's explosive and physical. He has that my ball mentality when the ball's in the air. You're not going to outwork this guy for the football when it's a 50-50 opportunity. I love the body control. I love the concentration. He's got really good ball skills, and he's got really good contact balance. Kind of a dense build, right? 6'1", 220. And that shows up when he's playing through contact, when people are trying to tackle him, when people are trying to get physical with him at the line of scrimmage or as a route runner. He's got really good contact balance. I think he's got plucky hands. He consistently snares the football away from his frame with extension. Very soft, reliable hands. And he can produce big plays in a variety of ways, whether that's getting down the field and winning, producing after the catch. He's a big play machine in some ways. And I love the versatility. He can play inside and the slot. He can play outside. He's a threat to all three levels of the field. You can hand the ball to him, and he offers return ability. Burst, physicality, contact balance, all of that shines in his release package. I think he makes good route adjustments versus zone and in the scramble drills. Spencer Rattler, the quarterback there at South Carolina, he plays off script a ton. And Xavier Legette kind of knows, all right, this is where I need to make myself available for my quarterback. He keeps working and finds space. His ability to win down the field is evident, and I think that sets up opportunities for him to work back down the stem. So when he has to run a stop route or come back to the football, he's got very good stop-start ability for a guy of his size. And there was plenty of plays where he'd run that shallow drag kind of right across the field. They'd throw it to him, and he'd be able to turn and pick up a bunch of yards. And I think he's a good blocker. That should be a major asset for the team that drafts him to be an insert blocker in the run game. This guy does a lot. I had a fun time watching this film, folks. Fun time. Now let me talk about the concerns, and then I have even more to say. The concerns, I still think there's growth for him to achieve as a route runner in terms of expanding his route tree. You know, he's 6'1", 220, and, you know, he's not going to be the most agile guy, but I'm encouraged with his ability to stop and start and throttle down quickly and work back to the football and cross face. Like, I like all that about him. So I think it's just a matter of expanding that route tree. I do think that he will be primarily a guy that wins on the vertical plane, go routes, stop routes. Over routes are going to be on the menu for him. Good at those shallow drags as well. But I think the biggest concern that you need to reconcile is, all right, 4 seasons of virtually no production, and then you had an amazing season in 2023. How do you reconcile that? And I know that there's people that buy into breakout age. And the thought process there is, well, if it takes you a long time in college to become productive, when you are becoming older and now you're playing against younger people, like in college, right? You're talking about like maybe 19 years old, 20 years old, some of these players. All right, it took you until you were 22 years old to be able to really be productive. And so you correlate that to the NFL and you kind of have some concerns. There's compelling data that says that. I'd love to be able to talk to the staff at South Carolina and find out the context between, well, what happened? Why wasn't this guy an answer for you prior to 2023? So you got to reconcile that. But folks, the player I watched in 2023 was outstanding. I love the skill set. If this was the pick at 28, I'd be very satisfied. Very satisfied. And in doing this evaluation, I promise you, after I did this evaluation, I wrote all my notes. I was then reminded of what Brandon Beane said a couple weeks ago at the NFL league meetings about what he's looking for in a wide receiver in the draft. And this is what he said. They have to be smart and versatile. He's going to value them based on the more they can do. He's going to ask himself, does their skill set offset what's already on the roster? And he specifically mentioned hands and run after catch ability. Folks, that is Xavier Legette. Has to be smart and versatile. I don't know how smart he is. I never met the guy, and I've never talked to anybody that's been around him. I assume he's pretty smart. Versatile, yeah, unbelievably versatile. Does their skill set offset what's already on the roster? Yeah, the Bills don't have a 6'1", 220-pound receiver that can win at all three levels of the field and provides a big blocker and an alpha mentality guy. They don't have that player. And then he specifically mentions hands and run after catch ability. Those are clear strengths of Xavier Legette. So in this detective work of figuring out, okay, what player lines up with what Brandon Beane said, to me, sirens go off because it's Xavier Legette. And so if the Bills draft a receiver at 28, give me Xavier Legette. I'll give you a spoiler. Xavier Legette is my wide receiver 4 in this class. I have Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze higher, obviously. The fourth guy for me is Xavier Legette. It's not Brian Thomas. I think Xavier Legette's a better prospect than Brian Thomas. So I'm all in. I'm all in on Xavier Legette. I found me a big receiver that I like. Here he is, Xavier Legette. If you go receiver at 28, let it be Xavier Legette. All right, I figured we spent a lot of time on him because I'm excited about him. I watched the film and wanted to give you my thoughts. So we only got to one receiver to this point. We got 5 more to get to. We'll get to Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy, and Roman Wilson on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with me. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever considered what you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you exercise, read, maybe spend time with a loved one, maybe catch up on some sleep? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find out what matters most to you so you can do more of it. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for people who've experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. That'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, I'm all done gushing about Xavier Legette. Got excited watching that tape. Let's get to these other receivers. Next up, wide receiver out of Florida State, Keon Coleman, 6'3", 213 pounds, 32 1/8-inch arms, 9 3/8 on the hand size, an RAS score of an 8.12, and he did not do the agilities. So that helps him because I think his agilities would be terrible. But he also ran a 4.61 40-yard dash, and then he opted to not run it at Florida State. He must have been satisfied with that. By comparison, Xavier Legette, I think he ran 4.39. So if you're talking about big linear athletes, they're not really comparable to me. Production-wise, Keon Coleman last year at Florida State, 50 catches, 658 yards, 11 touchdowns. Started his career at Michigan State in 2022, 58 catches, 798 yards, and 7 touchdowns. 82% of his snaps have come out wide, 5 yards after catch per reception, average depth of target of 12.2, a drop rate of 4.2%, and a contested catch rate of 46%. Why should the Bills consider drafting Keon Coleman? I think his size and ball skills pop on tape. He's a big receiver that plays the ball well. I think he's got really outstanding catch point concentration and body control. I think he's got very reliable hands, some of the best hands in the entire class, and he makes good ball adjustments. He can scoop it out low. He can go up and get it. He's very good with his hands. I think he's tough to tackle as well. For a bigger receiver, he's a guy that finds surprising production post-catch, like not a super twitched-up athlete or linearly explosive, but he's tough to tackle. He's physical, and I think he sees the field well. And he's also a guy that was an effective punt returner for Florida State in 2023, had 24 returns, also 19 fair catches, averaged 12.6 yards per punt return, and had 1 muff. So a pretty good season returning punts, and that's the harder skill set to find than the kick returners. So big receiver with good hands and ball skills. I think that's really what, in a nutshell, that's what Keon Coleman is. Now, what concerns are there about forecasting Keon Coleman to the Buffalo Bills? Well, I think he struggles to create space for himself as a route runner. I'm very underwhelmed with the route runner that is Keon Coleman. I think corners have a very easy time staying in phase with him. So many of his catches, like an unbelievably high percent of his catch opportunities are contested, and that's because he's not a separator. His speed is very gradual. He doesn't have good speed to begin with, and to get to top speed, it takes him a little bit of time, and that separation quickness is just missing from his game. When you ask him to change directions, when you ask him to stop and work back down the stem, there's significant throttle down. He needs extra steps to be able to gather himself and change directions. And he's constantly having to play through cornerbacks, right? And that's a tough way to make a living at the next level. And then for a bigger receiver, I like some of the physicality that he brings to the table, but I want to see it more as a blocker. So I think this is a buyer beware prospect for me. I see the path for him to be productive at the next level, but I think more often than not, these guys that really are always in contested situations, like the highlight reel for Keon Coleman is unbelievable. You're going to love it. I mean, he makes some of the craziest circus catches you'll ever see. But when you watch this tape, snap by snap, I think you're going to become very underwhelmed with his ability to create space for himself, and you got to be able to do it in the NFL. So he's kind of a not-for-me prospect. I think he's kind of a power slot at the next level. And for the Bills, you got Dalton Kincaid as your power slot. I don't know. This would be an underwhelming choice for me if the Buffalo Bills were to make it. I think there's too many cautionary tales of this type of skill set not working out in the NFL. There's efficiency metrics with Keon Coleman that are very alarming, and he's just a not-for-me guy, and I'd let somebody else find out if he's going to be a good player at the next level. Let's get to Xavier Worthy. So this is we are going to a completely different style of receiver. I mean, the opposite of Xavier Legette and Keon Coleman is what you have in Xavier Worthy, the wide receiver from Texas. 5'11", 165 pounds, 31 and an eighth inch arms, 8 3/4 inch hands, an RAS score of a 9.41. He's been really productive across 3 seasons for Texas. I mean, just a lot of production every single year. 69% of his snaps have come outside, 7.3 yards after catch per reception, 13.7 average depth of target, 7.1% drop rate, and a 34.1% contested catch win rate. So why should the Buffalo Bills consider drafting Xavier Worthy? Well, there's not a single player in the NFL that can run step for step with him down the field. Set the NFL record for 40-yard dash time. It's a 4.21. He ran at the combine. I mean, he's got more speed than anyone else in the history of the NFL, right? There's nobody that can run with him. And that ability to stress defenses down the field opens up a lot of spacing for his teammates underneath, because you either got to be able to bracket him, or you got to live with the idea that you're going to have somebody that's going to turn and run with him that physically cannot do it. Should open up a lot for your offense. So some of his value is in the big plays that he can create down the field, but also the spacing that he creates because he's on the field. He's got pull-away speed. And if he can clear contact as a route runner, nobody can run with him. Separation quickness is obvious. And I think what's cool about Xavier Worthy when you watch him at Texas, it's not like they just threw him, vertical throws on the field. They got him involved in a variety of different ways, which I could appreciate. I think he's got good ball tracking, which is required for a receiver like this. It's 165 pounds that's going to win down the field. And he's going to win every foot race with the ball in his hands. He's also an experienced punt returner, 40 career punt returns, also 43 fair catches, so 83 fielded punts at Texas, an average of 14.2 yards per punt return. He does have 2 muffs to this point. So what concerns are there about Xavier Worthy? Well, he's extremely thin. He's 5'11", 165 pounds. Playing through contact is a massive challenge. I mean, he's going to be going up against corners that are 30, 40 pounds more than him. There's going to be some challenges there. Very limited catch radius. He struggles to really extend for the football. And, really, he needs accurate throws is what I'm saying, right? Like, he doesn't have the ability to really just go pluck it and win away from his frame. And I think his hands are wildly inconsistent. I was surprised his drop rate was only 7.1%, because I felt like he just had some some really egregious drops. Sometimes when he's wide open, sometimes he's going to turn and run. I think his hands are just very, very inconsistent. So what you like here is very obvious. It's the explosive down the field receiving ability. The concern is absolutely, well, he's 165 pounds, and I don't think he has good hands. So he's a challenging evaluation for me. I think there's a ceiling and a floor conversation that is difficult because I see the ceiling, right? It's everything I talked about with the speed and what that opens up for the offense. But all right, well, can he play through contact? Can he do more than just win foot races? Is there a volume? Can he be a volume receiver in the NFL? It's tough. I admit this is a tough evaluation. If you draft him, I think you get really excited about the speed. If your team passes on him, I think you're probably okay. Well, I think there's a lot of incomplete components to his skill set that make me concerned. So he's a complicated evaluation for sure. All right, folks, we got Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, Javon Baker out of UCF still to come. Be sure to stick with me. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use on betting the tournament, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, let's get into it. I got 3 more receivers. I like these prospects. Let's talk about them. Next up is Roman Wilson, wide receiver from Michigan, 5'11", 185 pounds, 30 3/8 on the arm length, 9 3/8 on the hand size, 8.57 RAS score. This past season, 48 catches, 789 yards, and 12 touchdowns for Michigan. Keeping in mind, Michigan ran the ball like, I don't know, high percentage of the plays. I don't know what it is. I guess well over 60%. 40% of his snaps have come out wide, 5.4 yards after catch per reception, average depth of target of 14, 6.1% drop rate, 53% contested catch win rates. Pretty impressive for a guy that's 5'11", 185. So why should the Bills consider drafting Roman Wilson out of Michigan? Well, he's explosive, got 4.3 speed, and I like that he's a guy that's very adept at working the intermediate and deeper portions of the field. Like, this isn't a gadget receiver. This is a legit guy that knows how to win routes to the middle and deep parts of the field. Super bursty and explosive. He will run by defenders quick off the line. And there's plenty of instances of guys just not being able to transition and turn and run with him. And he's able to get that vertical separation pretty quickly. I think he's got outstanding hands, plucky hands, routinely snatches that football away from his frame with extension. I think he's just like I said with Xavier Legette, where J.J. McCarthy, their quarterback at Michigan, is willing to play off schedule a little bit. And I thought he did a very good job of finding space in the scramble drill, and he's very good in the red zone. I know that everybody thinks that you have to be tall to be an amazing red zone receiver. He's not tall. He's 5'11", and that ability to find that quick space and present a valuable target is pretty impressive. I like him after the catch. He transitions very quickly from receiver to runner, and then he can pick up chunks with his explosiveness. Not a very big guy, right? 5'11", 185, but I think he holds his own at the catch point when it comes to, all right, it's crowded, there's some contact. Pretty impressive what he's able to do. He plays big, which is something I'm typically looking for out of smaller receivers. Like, do you play big? Do you have those alpha moments? You get them from Roman Wilson for sure. And I also think that while he does need to develop his route tree a little bit, I don't think there's anything restrictive about him in terms of flexibility, change of direction, skill that would convince me that he can't develop a complete route tree. So what concerns are there about forecasting him to the Bills? Well, I think Roman Wilson has had very limited opportunities to play against press coverage in the college level. So, like, that's a big transition to all of a sudden there's somebody in your face. You got to have a more dynamic release package. He's a guy that very quickly gets into his routes. And so I think there's going to be a curve there. And you might initially have to play him in the slot and then motion him to get some free releases if you want to use him in other ways. I do think as a route runner, he has to develop. In college, I think he could just be more explosive than people and run by him. And I think there's a pace component, a pace component, a timing component. He needs to add more deceptiveness to his route running as opposed to, well, I'm just going to out athlete you because I can, right? There's more technique required in the NFL. And look, I do think that he plays big for a 5'11", 185-pound receiver, but I think that his contact balance and play strength, like in general, is pretty average. So really solid player. I think the Tyler Lockett comps hit for me. The Marvin Mims comps hit for me. I like Roman Wilson a lot. Not a candidate for me at 28, but if the Bills were looking for a receiver at 60, I'd be interested. But I think the reality with this Bills receiver conversation is, like, I love Roman Wilson. I do. Is he the type of receiver that this team needs, right? I think you can probably make a case that he isn't. All right, let's get to Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. 6'1", 189 pounds, 30 7/8 on the arms, 9 1/4-inch hands, RAS score of a 9.9. Had a good year this past year for Florida. Their quarterback was terrible. I mean, that was tough. That was tough to watch that tape because that quarterback missed so many throws. 65 catches, 963 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2023 for his career. And he started his career at Arizona State. So I think 3 seasons at Arizona State and then the last 2 at Florida. For his career, 41% of his snaps out wide, 5.5 yards after catch per reception, 12 yards is the average depth of target, drop rate of only 3.6%, 45% contested catch win rate. So why should the Bills consider drafting Ricky Pearsall? Well, he's a detailed route runner, twitchy, sudden, fluid, snappy hips, sharp through his breaks, like no route running restrictions whatsoever. You're going to love what this guy gives in that regard. I think he's the type of route runner that can manipulate coverage and create separation. Very good. Elite hands. I mean, this guy, I'm not going to say that he doesn't have an occasional drop because sometimes the ball can get on top of him quick and all that, but I think his hands are awesome. Just catching technique is on point, and some of the ball adjustments he made were unbelievable. I think he might have had the 3 best catches of any receiver that I watched. They might all belong to Ricky Pearsall. Just crazy catches that he can make. Plucky hands, soft, reliable hands. Tracks the football well, makes unbelievable adjustments, even late. And I think the traits that I talked about as a route runner, snappy hips, twitchy, sudden, fluid, that also makes him very good with the ball in his hands. So he's a yards after catch guy for sure. And Florida was definitely intentional about getting him the ball on some manufactured touches as well. So sometimes some handoffs, some quick shuffle passes, perimeter screens. They wanted to get the ball in his hands because he's very talented with the ball in his hands. And I think he is a 3-level threat where he can win deep and in the intermediate areas and the short areas. Also, punt return ability, 15 punt returns, 15 fair catches this year, 10.2 average, 0 muffs over the last couple seasons as a punt returner. So what concerns are there about forecasting him to the Bills? Well, I do think that he's likely best in the slot in the NFL, modest functional strength, not a guy that's going to consistently win leverage battles, right? So he needs to be a good route runner to create that space because he's not going to be able to out-physical people to create leverage advantages. And then he's going to turn 24 like September of this year, so he's going to be a little bit of an older rookie. And, coming from kind of a weird Florida offense, to be honest with you. So I think there could be a curve there, but you want route running in hands. I mean, you get that from Ricky Pearsall. I think he can be a good slot receiver in the NFL. But again, is this the one? It's the type of player the Bills need. I think there's probably a case that it's not. Last receiver I want to get to here today, Javon Baker, wide receiver out of Central Florida, UCF. It's a bigger guy, 6'1", 202 pounds, 32 1/4-inch arms, 9 5/8 on the hand size, RAS score of a 7.85, so a good, not elite athlete. Been productive over the last couple of years. This past season, 52 catches, 1,139 yards. That's a ton of yards per reception. 7 touchdowns. 2022, 56 catches, 796 yards, and 5 touchdowns. 81% of his snaps have come outside, 5.6 yards after catch per reception, average depth of target of 14.7, 11.4% drop rate, 56% contested catch win rate. Spent his first 2 seasons in college at Alabama. Then he transferred over to UCF. So why should the Bills consider drafting Javon Baker? Well, he's got size, right? He's got a very appealing blend of size and play strength. Those are very likable components to his game. I like his release package. He's got a lot of different technique to be able to win routes early and beat press coverage. I think there's a lot of translatability there for how he wins to get off the line in college, projecting him to the NFL. 81% of his snaps were out wide. So I love that translatability there. I think he stacks vertically really well. He maintains vertical leverage really well and wins down the field. Some of what Gabe Davis brought, like I think you see a lot of that. Okay, I can get on top of this corner. I can make this corner play through me, and I don't think they can. I think he gives you that similar type skill set. I like his route running to an extent. I think he's got good tempo, makes good adjustments on the fly. Another receiver that I thought did a good job working scramble drills, finding space, presenting that available target for his quarterback. Outstanding ball skills down the field. That definitely pops. And I think for a guy that you look at as a vertical route runner, he ran a lot of different routes that required like multiple breaks. And I thought he did a good job of like setting up those breaks, getting in and out of them, and then, winning that leverage battle down the field and maintaining vertical leverage. So what concerns are there about forecasting into the Buffalo Bills? Well, he does have amazing ball skills, but he's not immune to a concentration drop. There's times where you're like, man, you put yourself in such an awesome position to make this catch, and then you just didn't catch it. So concentration drops are on the film. I still think he is developing as an overall route runner. I like the vertical route running. How much better can we get as a short route runner, as an intermediate route runner? I'd like to see more of that in his game. And then I always have this question as a guy that's going to be this like down the field vertical receiver. He only has modest speed, right? This isn't an explosive guy. Nobody's going to call him that. And so can he pull away from good NFL man corners? He pulled away from the corners at Cincinnati and Oklahoma. Those types of teams, what I watch him against, like Tulane, like teams like that. Can he do it in the NFL, right? I think there's some questions there. Could he be a 2? Maybe so. Might be a better like wide receiver 3 or 4. But a guy that I have a day 2 grade on. So there you have it. 6 more receivers. We've now covered 12 receivers. And I got like 6, 7, 8 more that I want to get to. So the wide receiver conversation is becoming more complete, but there's still more to do. This is a good year for wide receivers and some nice options for the Buffalo Bills. And hopefully by draft day, we're going to be we'll be well acquainted with a lot of them. So we know exactly what the Buffalo Bills are doing come draft night. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. I wanted to do a James Cook discussion today. That might be tomorrow. I definitely want to get to more position groups, herd mentality, plenty of coverage really every day here on Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.